YouTube, are the Orlando Magic contenders or pretenders for the upcoming 2024 NBA playoffs in the Eastern Conference? Let's talk about it. So first thing I want to do before we talk about it is just give a ton of props to the Orlando Magic coaching staff, players, and entire organization for their 180 turnaround from last season to this season. Currently, they are sitting third in the Eastern Conference, which I think I can confidently say not a lot of people predicted going into the season. I personally had the Magic around a play-in team type situation, but they have really turned their franchise around this season, like I said, with standout play from players like first-time All Star Paulo Banchero, amazing complimentary piece Franz Wagner, and an extremely underrated season from standout role player Jalen Suggs. Magic have a lot of depth, and currently at the time me recording this video, with about 1 week left to go in the 2024 regular season, they are sitting at second in the entire NBA in team defensive rating, which is absolutely incredible. So like I said, we have to give a lot of credit to Jamal Mosley and his staff, along with the players and front office, really just the entire Orlando Magic organization for their 180 turnaround this season. Now let's get into some of the points I want to make in this video. One of them being, I think there's a trend going around the NBA community, which I'm not a fan of, and that is that a lot of people, on YouTube and social media and Twitter and stuff like that, it seems like anytime there's a new team on the rise or has a lot of new, exciting, young, and unproven talent in the playoffs, a lot of these teams I've noticed are being dismissed in playoff conversations throughout this season and last season. A good example would be last year's Sacramento Kings squad, where they were second in the Western Conference by the end of the season, and nobody really took them seriously in regards to playoff contention. And I know they did lose in the first round to the Warriors, but that's beside the point. I think we should be critically analyzing these case by case, these new teams on the rise that have young talent, like I said, that might be unproven in the playoffs. And just because we're unfamiliar with them and haven't seen them in a playoff setting doesn't mean necessarily that they can't contend for a title. I do think there is some validity to the theory that I think a lot of younger teams that aren't experienced in the playoffs aren't necessarily going to be favorites to win a playoff series against another team that is. But I do think it's kind of a ridiculous dialogue that teams like the Magic and the Pacers and the Thunder and the Wolves I'm seeing this year, a lot of these teams are young and up and coming, haven't necessarily been to like the conference finals or anything like that, but we kind of just write them off as NBA fans too often, and I'm just kind of tired of seeing that. So I'd like to get that that point out of the way, because I do think the Magic are one of those teams this year, and I will try my best for everything I say in this video to not be because they're just a new team that I haven't seen in the playoffs yet. I want to base their playoff hopes off of everything they've done this season and the roster they have, and not around them being a young team with a lack of playoff experience that hasn't been there before. So I'm going to try to do that throughout this video. To my first question in the intro, are the Orlando Magic contenders or pretenders? I kind of think they're pretenders, if I'm being honest. The fact that they've never been there before, and the fact that a lot of these players are young and maybe inexperienced in an environment like the NBA playoffs, has almost no weight to my conclusion of that subject. I will say, when talking about things like contenders or pretenders, I also wanted to bring this up, that basically, it's all relative to the individual team's expectations in the playoffs. I don't think a lot of Orlando Magic fans or, the organization would necessarily consider a finals run something realistic for this year. Could it happen? Of course. But if I'm the Orlando Magic fans and players and front office, I'm not expecting this team to go to the finals. It's not like a finals or bust type scenario. I think for the Magic, their expectations are to play their best in the playoffs, and they lose to a better team, that's just going to have to be the case. But I think, this is a season for the Magic where the expectation has already been exceeded. And, being the third seed, let's say you lose in the first round to a team like Cleveland or Miami or Philadelphia, I think that's perfectly reasonable to expect of this particular Magic team, because like I said, they've already exceeded a lot of expectations. So I think it's unfair to put them in the same category as like a Boston or Milwaukee, where it's like get to the finals and win or bust type of season. So they're in a win now type of mode, those teams. And I think the Orlando Magic are trying to build up to that, right? Like they want to get a few winning seasons under their belt. They want to play their best basketball, of course, and they want to improve steadily along the way. I think they're doing that already. It's not necessarily going to be a massive disappointment for the Orlando Magic if they don't make it to like the conference finals, because like I said, they're exceeding a lot of people's expectations already. So I think that's important to add into the conversation, that championship contenders or top teams in each conference all have different expectations for their individual franchises and seasons. So it's not like a general label you can put on every team in the entire NBA. So that out of the way, I just want to share some of the things I think about this particular team when it comes to their ceiling, and like what their strengths and weaknesses are as a team, and where the organization can build on, like I said before, into the next few seasons, and with this roster and what they can improve on for the next season and stuff like that. So let's get into that. So like I said, the Orlando Magic have been shocking the world basically. I think there's a good chance by the end of the season, which is only a few more games games for them, that they basically end up as like a 3 seed or even a 2 seed's a realistic thing for them. They're only 1 game behind the Milwaukee Bucks right now, so there's a chance they could slide into that 2 seed. So either way you slice it, I think they're going to be within the top 4 seeds of the Eastern Conference for the NBA playoffs, and I do think there's a chance that they could really make a lot of noise in the first round and maybe upset like a Milwaukee or a Cleveland Cavaliers team or something like that. I think it's going to depend on their matchup, but the thing that stands out about the Magic is their defense and their cohesion as a team. You know, they play really efficient, smart basketball. Like I said, spearheaded by Coach Jamal Mosley. Got to give him a lot of credit. I think he should be Coach of the Year if I was going to pick one. They have a really young, athletic team that can run out in transition and do a lot of damage in the open court. They can give you a lot of problems with their, you know, athleticism and size. Like I said, the matchups are going to be tough for whoever plays them. I do think a team like Milwaukee would be able to handle that pretty well, or obviously Boston, but there's a lot of ways they can beat you. You know, I'm not a huge believer in their half-court offense, if I had to be honest, because I think they lack a little bit of shot creation and, you know, spacing and shooting in the half court. But that's their biggest flaw, in my opinion, is their shooting and spacing. The ability to generate a great shot on any given possession in the half court setting against like an elite defense, I think that's going to be a struggle for them in the playoffs. And that's why I think they could really use, like, you know, an offensive-minded shot creating guard that can create off the dribble and space the floor super well, add gravity to their lineup. That's the one thing I would attack in the offseason if I were the Orlando Magic, and just, you know, maybe some more offensive firepower in general. But I think they need more shooters and more shot creation in half-court setting. Like I said, their spacing to me isn't super optimal. They do have, like I said, a ton of size with players like Paolo, Franz, Wendell Carter Jr., Mo Wagner, backup center in Batadze, I hope I'm saying that correctly, Joe Ingles. Like, there's a lot of front court, you know, real strong, solid players that are gonna be tough to, you know, contend with. You just can't teach size, right? It doesn't matter how good of a defender you are. Sometimes the opposing player is just too powerful and strong, and I think the Magic have taken advantage of their strengths as a roster in terms of that and really made that an issue for opposing defenses, which is a really smart thing to do. You know, Paulo Banchero, I just want to talk about, I think has played some of the best basketball of any two-way player this season. He's really stepped up his defense, in my opinion, and also he's just playing a lot more efficient. The playmaking is a lot better for me. They're currently averaging 23 points a game, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, about a steal and a block per game. And like I said, you know, Paulo is basically one of the primary playmakers on this team at this point, and he has the ball in his hands quite a lot. So for them to be winning at the rate that they are, it could just prove that, you know, he's going to be able to make a lot of these right decisions. I mean, it's clearly working, and being able to facilitate an offense like he has, I think is really, really impressive, because I think one of my criticisms of his game last year was, you know, maybe sometimes his decision making, and he seemed a little bit out of control a lot of the time in regards to his playmaking, stuff like that. So I think that's a big step up for him. I really think him and Franz Wagner are people you can build around long term. They're really, really solid pieces, and I think Paulo has the potential and capabilities of being a solid, you know, real legit #1 option in this league. I think you're seeing that this season with Orlando. Another player I really, really love that I want to talk about is Jalen Suggs. I think he's one of the more underrated players in the entire NBA. I think he should be an all defensive team player this season. You know, Jalen Suggs, he really struggled with his offensive efficiency and his shooting efficiency, but he has really turned himself into a strong offensive player, can play make, and he can also shoot the 3 pretty well this season. And honestly, not pretty well, really well. Last time I checked, he was shooting about 40% from 3 on 5 attempts a game, which is, like I said, a massive leap for Jalen Suggs in particular. Combine that with his elite perimeter defense, and I think you have a core player, again, to build around. I think Jalen Suggs is a real keeper in Orlando, and I don't think people notice that enough about him. He's just a really, really versatile and utility type of guard that I think, like I said earlier, his start to his career after being a high draft pick, I'm not sure Orlando could have imagined he would have been this much of an impact player for their team by this point in his career after such a rocky start, like I said, with the efficiency. So then you got guys like Cole Anthony, provide some offense. Joe Ingles, really seasoned veteran, super efficient offensive player, really smart player as well. You got guys like Jonathan Isaac, one of the more versatile defenders in the league. It'd be hard to keep him on the floor at times, I think, unless he's playing the 5, because he's super limited and inconsistent offensively to me. But I do think there's a ton of value to his presence on the team, obviously, because of his extremely versatile defensive skill set. And then Gary Harris as a shooter. But I just think, like I said, I think Orlando's going to struggle in the half court scoring the basketball against teams like Cleveland that have a lot of size in the front court as well that can match up against those guys. And then you got, like, you know, Boston, Milwaukee, Indiana has a solid defensive front court. So I just think there's a lot of teams that are going to be able to match up well with the Magic in the first round, like I said, and are going to provide some issues for them in the half court setting, particularly on offense for the Orlando Magic, because like I said, the shot creation, in my opinion, just isn't there yet. And the floor spacing and the shooting, just, you know, you don't have enough of it right now. So that's one thing I think the Orlando Magic should aggressively target in free agency and the offseason, because they're a team that I think already is like a super superstar or just the right pieces away from being like Eastern Conference Finals favorites and stuff like that. Like their defense is so good and their young players are progressing so well. I think if you just add a couple of really solid, like, you know, elite shooters or maybe a guard that can come in and just get you buckets and create and run the offense, and then you have a lot of catch and shoot guys, I just think it, you know, to kind of take a lot of that pressure off Paolo and Franz to be able to do all that for you, I think that's optimal for Orlando. I think that's something they will definitely try to target in the offseason. You know, there's guys like Anthony Black on your roster who you drafted pretty high to kind of be that type of player for you. And if you just look at the numbers for him, you know, I haven't watched all the Orlando games. I'm not going to pretend I have, but it seems like he has struggled to find a consistent role as, you know, a consistent guard in the rotation. So maybe you count on him to improve as the years go on, but their expectations are very important in this context. And while I don't think they're going to make the Eastern Conference Finals, and I do think they're going to have some really tough issues getting out of the first round, and if second round, I don't think is going to be any easier, obviously. So I do think there's a lot of, you know, growing to do there, but I already think there's so much growing that has already been done. So there's so much to be excited about for Orlando for the first time in so long. You know, they've been in a massive rebuild that's taken a long time, way too long, in my opinion. You know, really since Dwight Howard left, they've either been mid or a lottery team, right? So I think there's a ton to build on after this season. And like I said, if you target shooting and shot creating guards in free agency or the draft, I think you're in a really, really good spot if you're Orlando. And I think that's something to note, like I said, when talking about their expectations, because for me, and if I was an Orlando fan, I'd already be exceeded. Obviously, you want them to go as far as they can in the playoffs and you want them to play their best. As long as they play their best, I think you got to be happy with the result as an Orlando fan and organization member, player, coach, whatever. Maybe you take a less aggressive approach and count on even more development from Paolo, Franz, and the young core in the offseason. That's another approach you could take, although I would try to supplement them through free agency and the offseason and maybe a couple trades. Not super big moves or anything franchise altering maybe right away, but I do think you have to be somewhat aggressive this offseason, considering a lot of these other Eastern Conference teams are going to get better themselves, and you don't want to stagnate and you want to show your young players that you're committed to winning. So I think, like I said, a good example of the wrong thing to do would be the Sacramento Kings this year. They kind of just held down their core, didn't really add anything to the team. They were not very aggressive in free agency, and they totally could have been. I think that was a big mistake for them, and now they're kind of in a position where they have to put it all on the line if they're really going to do something in the offseason. They're still a really good team, and they're obviously probably going to be a play-in team or a playoff team, but I'd be pretty reluctant to say their ceiling is anywhere close to the conference finals. So I think Orlando's just got to keep developing those young players and see where they're at next year. Hopefully they get a ton better. If they don't, you go out and you make some moves and really target the weaknesses of your team. But for now, I think you're in a great spot and the ball's in your court and you're in the driver's seat if you're Orlando. So Orlando, props to you, props to the organization. Hopefully you guys can figure all this out. But already, like I said, if you're an Orlando fan, you got to be super happy about where your team's at. And that's just pretty much it for the video. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. I want to talk about the Orlando Magic. I don't think enough people are talking about them. Third in the Eastern Conference. I mean, you got to talk about a team like that. That's such a good story. But make sure you guys drop a like on this video if you guys did enjoy it. It helps out the channel a lot and it helps new people find the video. So if you did enjoy it, make sure you share it as much as you can and subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Let me know down in the comment section what you think of the Magic. I'm always down there trying to engage with you guys and talk to you guys about the topics in the video. If you have any thoughts about it, let me know. And like I said, subscribe. We're trying to upload every single day. If you don't want to miss any more content like this with the playoffs coming up, I think you should subscribe and stick around because we got a lot of fun stuff planned in the next few weeks. Hopefully you guys have a fantastic rest of your day today, and hopefully your favorite team wins their next game and can improve in the offseason and build around their young core. I will catch you guys in the next one. This is your boy DeHave, and as always, peace.